Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a silly line of questioning. And now we get to the real point. This case never happens if it's not for the fact that this doctor's hit by Gwyneth Paltrow. Matt Clark, personal injury lawyer with Cohn Clark in Bakersfield, California, and today we're reacting to the Gwyneth Paltrow ski accident trial.
Gwyneth Paltrow rushes into court wearing dark sunglasses and a long coat with security by her side.
Are you confident, Gwyneth? Are you going to win this case?
Moments later, the Oscar winner turned wellness guru walked into the courtroom in a cream turtleneck sweater and brown pants. Paltrow is facing Terry Sanderson, a 76-year-old retired optometrist who claims she plowed into him on a ski slope, leaving him with 4 broken ribs and permanent brain damage. The collision happened in February 2016 on a beginner ski trail at a ritzy resort in Park City, Utah. During opening statements today...
So let me just start. I can tell by the video of the ski slope, I've been to this place, so full disclosure, this is Deer Valley, just outside of Park City, Utah.
Paltrow's lawyer said Sanderson was the one who crashed into her.
Suddenly, she sees 2 skis appear between her skis. And a man comes up right behind her, almost body to body like this, and starts groaning. He says, you ran into me? And Gwyneth's like, no, you ran square right into me.
In a dramatic moment, Paltrow's lawyer held up a single dollar bill, which is what she's symbolically asking for in her countersuit.
Now, this is a lot to go through for $1.
Paltrow clearly isn't enjoying the attention, at one point holding up a blue book to shield her face from a photographer.
Well, so as best I can tell, and from what I've read, this is, I guess I would call it a ski and run case or just a simple ski accident case. Number one, and I think it's important we talk about this, anytime you go skiing or you engage in any activity where there are inherent risks, you assume certain risks as a participant in that type of activity. As a lawyer, we call that assumption of the risk, right? And so one of those risks that you may assume is that it could be a collision on the ski slope. You might fall, right? There are also instances, of course, and I guess that's the claim in this case, that someone negligently ran into you. And as somebody who's skied in the past, the way I was taught, if you are uphill, you have to watch the person downhill from you. That person has the right of way. And so it's similar to the rules of the road when we drive a car. There are rules when you're skiing, and I imagine that there's been people in this trial that have testified to those rules. Yeah, so that's very typical, where you have somebody sues somebody else, and that person who has been sued files a countersuit or cross complaint back against the plaintiff. And so those 2 cases are heard at the same time. And it appears, based on Gwyneth's lawyer's statement in the case, that she's asking for exactly $1 from the jury for what happened to her on the day of the instance, since she is claiming that this doctor ran into her. The reason you do something like that, the reason that you'd file a lawsuit and you'd only claim $1, or you'd make a counterclaim for just $1, at that point it's symbolic, right? It is symbolic to show that I won, that the jury believed me over the other side. You may argue, it's like, well, if you get a defense verdict, if Gwyneth was only being sued and she got a defense verdict, isn't that a win? Not necessarily, because what that could mean is that the plaintiff didn't meet his burden of proof. The defense has no obligation to put up any evidence whatsoever. So maybe the plaintiff doesn't meet his burden of proof. Gwyneth wins by default, essentially, in that circumstance. So what she's trying to do with the countersuit is she's saying, hold on here for a second. I want to be able to prove that I was in the right, that this gentleman ran into me, and symbolically the jury can prove that by awarding her $1.
I'm shifting gears.
Right.
So, Ms. Paltrow, the reason I got involved in this case in the first place was your counterclaim. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk with you about the counterclaim. Is it true that you feel it's unfair that Mr. Sanderson has brought this case against you?
I do.
And he has deterred you from enjoying the rest of what was a very expensive vacation?
Well, I lost half a day of skiing.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I I'm not sure that's the answer I would have given, right? Like, that seems rather trivial. Although, since she's only asking for $1 and that lift ticket at Deer Valley probably cost her, $150 for the day, she's still taking a loss on that half day she lost of skiing, right? She's not asking for that full amount back. But I think it brings up an interesting point, and that is, I don't think the other party, I don't think the doctor is asking for a tremendous amount of money either. I've read in a couple of places that he's asking for $300,000. I guess we'll see in closing argument exactly what the number is, but $300,000 or $500,000. I would suspect that more money than that has already been spent on the litigation of this case. And this is almost certainly not an insured loss kind of case, right? So no, there isn't some insurance company for Gwyneth Paltrow that is paying the legal fees or is going to ultimately pay a verdict should she lose. I would be surprised if that was the case. I think that there are, in some esoteric insurance policies, coverages that might apply, but I doubt it's here. So, in other words, she's paid for a defense of this case that probably far exceeds the value of the case. I really think this is about her making a point, right? That this guy's claim is BS, it's fraudulent, that he shouldn't recover anything from her. And what I really think she's doing here is she's saying, look, if I weren't a celebrity, if I didn't have fame, this guy would have never made a claim, period, right? And I find that undercurrent of the case quite interesting.
And you're bringing this claim for $1.
I am.
Okay. In fact, your counsel, Steve, do you still have that dollar bill? That
I'll let you use your own.
I'm not gonna even respond to that. Nah, I don't need it.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't need it. You saw Mr. Owens wave that $1 around, right?
I did.
Okay. $1 in symbolic damages. Is that accurate?
It's an actual dollar that I'm asking for.
Okay, but you also have testified when I asked you questions in your deposition that $1 is symbolic. Do you remember me asking you about
It's symbolic because the damages would actually be more.
that? Okay. But remember me asking you, is it symbolic? And you said, yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. And I asked you as well, you learned about that through Taylor Swift because she asked for $1 in symbolic damages, right?
And I think I said at that point I had not been familiar with it, but I since am.
Now you are. But at the time, a couple years ago in 2020, you didn't know anything about Taylor Swift's $1 symbolic damage lawsuit?
Just relevance, Your Honor.
Counsel?
Yeah, because I asked her about it at the time, and she denied it. Correct.
Can you answer the
Just
question?
relevance.
I was not aware at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a silly line of questioning. She's trying to impeach Gwyneth here. This would be the doctor's lawyer trying to impeach Gwyneth over this claim for $1 and trying to suggest that she lied in her deposition by denying knowledge that Taylor Swift had made a claim for $1. That's ridiculous cross-examination, in my opinion. I mean, number one, I didn't know Taylor Swift filed a lawsuit for $1, and I'm a lawyer. So I wouldn't expect Gwyneth Paltrow to know that. It's also just a total collateral issue, has nothing to do with the case. Silly effort to impeach. I'd be curious to see what the jury thought of it.
Are you good friends with Taylor Swift?
No,
Relevance.
Overruled?
You're not good friends with Taylor Swift.
I would not say we're good friends. We are friendly. I've taken my kids to one of her concerts before, but we don't talk very often.
You've never given Miss Swift personal, intimate gifts for Christmas.
Your Honor. Relevance, or I
Sustained
would
as
like
to
a
relevance.
bench trial.
Well,
or-
she's just said that she wasn't friends with her, so I'm inquiring on that.
Ask her about Oprah. I mean,
Mr. Owens, sustained. Please move on.
You're telling the jury that you are here asking for $1.
I am.
That's not totally accurate, though, is it?
What do you mean?
Well, the jury isn't going to be deciding this, but you're also asking the judge to award you attorney's fees for over hundreds of thousands of dollars. Isn't that true?
All right, and now we get to the real point, okay? And again, this is, in my opinion, a pretty poor job of examination by the doctor's attorney, right? I mean, she's getting into some rather esoteric legal weeds, and frankly, something that a jury usually is not made aware of, right? But in almost all jurisdictions, if you are the prevailing party in a lawsuit, you are entitled to something called prevailing party costs. Now, I'm a lawyer in California, and so I'm very familiar with prevailing party costs in California. Those costs do not, unless there was some contractual issue or it was a very specific kind of case, those costs do not normally include attorney's fees, but can include things like the cost of depositions and court fees and jury costs, exhibit costs, copying fees, kind of goes on and on and on. What the lawyer is doing here is making the point that in addition to the $1, if Gwyneth is the prevailing party in the case, in a post-trial motion, her lawyers will be asking the court, based on her being the prevailing party, to award her money back for costs, right? And that could, I'm not familiar with the laws in Utah, maybe it does include attorney's fees, I don't know, but that could total up to several $100,000.
Yes? Objections overruled?
Thank you. And I'll restate it because I know it's been a little while. So it's not true, Ms. Paltrow, that you are just asking for $1. You are also asking, and this is not for the jury to decide, but this is for the court to decide later, you're asking for your attorney's fees in this case, which could be quite substantial. Is that not true?
So
It's a
I'm
yes- it's a
asking
yes
for
or no.
$1 for me and then reimbursement of attorney's fees, which is a separate thing,
And that could be a substantial amount, correct?
potentially.
Okay. And when your counsel got up waving that $1, don't you think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization?
I have one more question on this issue, and this is now 3.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Don't you think that that's $1? That's a mischaracterization, isn't it?
I took it as I would receive that $1, which is all I am asking for.
I think Gwyneth did a nice job answering that question. Thus far, from what I've seen, she makes a pretty good witness. I mean, she's calm, she's collected, she allows the attorney to ask her full question. She's not being overly reactionary in her facial expressions. It's what I would expect from an Academy Award-winning actress, I guess, but she's doing a very nice job on the stand. I'll also say this. I think the judge made a poor decision there. I don't think the fact that the jury may award post-trial costs or attorney's fees has any relevance to the task assigned to this jury in making a decision on the plaintiff's claims or Gwyneth's cross-complaint.
Paltrow says Sanderson hit her. A source close to the actress tells People magazine she feels, quote, icky about the trial and just wants it to be over.
Well, I mean, if you feel icky about the trial and you want it to be over, you could pay the claim, right? Like, that's one way to get it over quickly.
It's high-tech computer animation
Oh, we
of
got
what
an
Gwyneth
animation.
Paltrow says happened on the ski slope. That's Paltrow in black, and retired optometrist Terry Sanderson is in blue.
2 skis came between my skis, forcing my legs apart, and then there was a body pressing against me, and there was a very strange grunting noise.
Sanders.
I have a question about that. So they just showed an animation. I don't know if that was shown to the jury or not, but as a lawyer who practices personal injury law, there are cases where we have animations done. We actually call them a visualization. You know, that alone costs a lot of money, right? And so if you're going to do a visualization of the ski accident and you intend to show that to the jury, you could be spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 just on the visualization, right? And so that just kind of gives you an idea of, again, what the costs are in a case like this before you even begin to account for things like attorney's fees.
Her conservative courtroom style has been making headlines every day. But is it helping or hurting her case with the jury?
I think Gwyneth's outfits are actually helping her with the jury. They're all very everyday. She's not screaming celebrity through her outfits, and that's because she's refraining from color, she's refraining from glamour. Everything is very easy, very effortless.
I think that her team, her legal team, are actually discussing her outfits and Or is that a strategy, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. If they aren't, they're making a mistake. I mean, if I'm going to court with one of my clients, and I don't care if it's trial or if it's a settlement conference or if my client's showing up to some law in motion hearing, we talk exactly about what the client is going to wear to those events, right? I mean, the rule is from the moment you walk out of our office, you are on trial. You don't know where the judge or the jury may be. They could be on the sidewalk. They could be in the line to get in the courthouse. They could be inside the courthouse in the hallways. So you need to make sure that that entire time you are presenting yourself in a way that you want to present yourself in front of the jury. I cannot imagine in a case like this that Gwyneth's legal team hasn't at least had some discussions about what she's going to wear to trial each day. Now, that being said, you know, I don't know. She strikes me as somewhat of a style guru herself. I mean, if you own your own website and you're selling your own goods, I imagine that you have your own sense of style. And it strikes me as, you know, she's probably adhering to that sense.
Basically, you asked me to evaluate Dr. Bain's biomechanical engineering analysis to see if it was accurate and correct.
And what material did you review? I think you already mentioned you read his transcript and you watched his trial testimony. Is that right?
I did, yes.
And maybe for the jury.
Okay, so what we're watching here, this is the testimony of a gentleman by the name of Dr. Irving Scher. He's a biomechanical expert. If I'm again, I'm just getting clips here, but if I understand the testimony correctly, what happened is Dr. Sanderson's lawyers hired a biomechanical expert in the case, and so Gwyneth's lawyers have hired a biomechanical expert to review Dr. Sanderson's expert's opinions and comment on those, okay? It is very common in a lawsuit. In auto accident cases all the time, we see biomechanical testimony. What that really means is, can a certain event cause a certain claimed injury, right? And so that's one of the things that biomechanicists will testify to, and I'm assuming that's what they're doing here in this case.
Let's talk about skier collisions. You've, as you explained earlier, done research to understand what forces are like on the ski slope. In this case, how would you apply what you know about physics to understand the claims about the ski collision?
Sure, I would apply Newton's laws to the contacts, the different versions of the events. And
you fall asleep yet? Yeah,
what
fall
makes
asleep.
sense, how it would unfold.
This is what happens in real trial, by the way, during biomechanical testimony sometimes.
To make sense. Is it self-consistent?
Yeah. All that tells me is they're spending a lot of money on this thing. All right, so as we've been sitting here, you know, we've been watching these clips. The verdict just came in, so this is literally as live as we can get it. Let me just skim it here real quick. It says a Utah jury has found Gwyneth Paltrow not liable in a 2016 ski collision case. Paltrow was also victorious in her counterclaim against the man who sued her. So what that means is that Dr. Sanderson lost in his claim against Ms. Paltrow. We've talked about that a little bit. That means that she now gets to go to the court and ask the court to award her money for her costs. We call this prevailing party costs, okay? In addition to that, Gwyneth Paltrow made a counterclaim against the doctor, and the jury found in her favor. So she won across the board, right? She wins her counterclaim. That's $1 she asked for. And then, of course, she wins on the defense verdict. That means that she is likely to be entitled to prevailing party costs, which could include attorney's fees. It would be a lot of money. Overall, complete and utter disaster for Dr. Sanderson. Total loss. Based on what I saw of the trial, precisely what I would have predicted. We want to hear from you, so if you like this video, please comment below. Give us some ideas for future reaction videos, and please subscribe to Cohn Clark.